this moment. Open your heart to new possibilities today, tomorrow, and always. Amen.
Very good. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Nancy Hernandez to the stage. My name is Kate Trevey. As Nancy makes her way up here, I serve as the Director of Engineering and Innovation Leadership Development here at Marquette. I've been here at Marquette for nearly 15 years. I did my undergrad here, and it's really my honor to have a chance to talk with Nancy and ask some questions of her as we share in this wonderful Mission Week. So Amy, thank you so much for your beautiful opening remarks. Inviting us all in our hearts to that opening of possibility. And Tina, in your prayer, thank you so much. So Nancy Hernandez is a member of the Marquette Board of Trustees. She's an alumna of our graduate school, founder and president of Abrazo Multicultural Marketing and Communication, and president of the Hispanic Collaborative. She holds a really impressive number of board roles as well. And as I shared with Nancy, it's one thing for me to introduce her, but another thing for her to share with all of you in her own words, her story and a little bit about the things she wants you to know about who she is. So Nancy, let's begin there if we could today. What would you want to share by way of introduction about yourself with this wonderful group of women from Marquette today?
The first thing I'll share, of course, is that my favorite board happens to be Marquette.
Good
so.
answer. Good answer.
And my favorite colors are blue and gold. So
wonderful.
Well, I think some of the things that I think define me that are part of my history is I'm from Milwaukee. I was born and raised right here, right across the viaduct on First and Mineral. So we could all run there and run back, and we'd have maybe only about a 3-mile run. So it's very, very close. And the area that Marquette is in is space that as a kid, come to the mall and come to the library. And so this is my home. And I went away to school and came back, and I consider it a privilege to be able to build a career here and work here and give back. I spent about 10 years in hospitality field before deciding to do my own thing and start an ad agency. And really during my 10 years on the corporate side and my business, I really chose to give back and get involved with community and give back to a lot on the Latino community, a lot of economic lifts. I tended to volunteer with those types of organizations as a way to how can I help improve the community that I grew up in and everybody who still lives there. So I still patronize. I don't live in the Walker's Point area anymore, but I patronize a lot of businesses there. As a matter of fact, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and when I was pregnant with her, literally the entire Cielito Lindo restaurant on 2nd and National knows my name and everything about me because they'd see me every morning almost for breakfast there. But I care deeply about this community, and I try to make that a part of everything I do. So
great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. For those in our audience that don't know much about the Hispanic Collaborative, can you share a little bit more about your work with the Hispanic Collaborative?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Hispanic Collaborative really got started about 2.5 years ago. Myself and another leader in the community, we thought, how can we bring community leaders together to find a way to improve outcomes at a faster, bigger scale for the Latino community. There's a lot of great work that gets done every day, but how can we really help make an impact? And so we got together a small group of about 12 to 15 Latino leaders at that time. And it just so happened that the Greater Milwaukee Foundation came out with their 2016 Latino study, which looked as a statistical portrait over the last 2.5 decades of what's been happening here with the Latino community. And that study confirmed a lot of things that we knew anecdotally, that there are definitely bright spots, namely the population growth, the net population growth and net job growth in the area is attributed 100% to the growth of the Latino community. So it's a very important part of our future prosperity. But a lot of negative trends there. And so we thought that the study, while it was great, didn't have a set of recommendations, and we felt that there should be kind of, what do we do with this information? How do we action on it? And we decided to put 100 Latino community leaders in a room and come out with a set of recommendations. I mean, in that process, we built the Hispanic Well-Being Index as a way to compare how Milwaukeeans were doing here versus the other top 50 metros. And that day was really the birth of the Hispanic Collaborative, with the shared goal of moving Milwaukee into a top 10 city on that well-being index. So, and I feel blessed that, you know, I was in a position that I could help get it off the ground. I had done this before. I had started my business. I started Hispanic Professionals of Greater Milwaukee. And I was in a spot that I could do that. And here I am, about 3 years later, right?
Great. So I'll follow up on a couple of those things in a minute, but as we ground ourselves in this Mission Week, and we kick off Mission Week this week, as Amy so beautifully framed, being open to possibility, you know, so much of that is being open to the call in our lives, our vocation, to use our gifts and talents in service of the needs of the world. And you've made that your life's work, certainly here in our Milwaukee community, and really serving the needs of the world. Where does that come from for you in terms of really being able to serve and seeing the greater impact that you can make using those gifts and talents that you have curated and built over the course of your life and your career?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. You know, I will say for me, a lot of it starts at home and with family. You know, we grew up in Milwaukee. My parents met here, even though they're both from Mexico. And we spent summers, really, in Mexico. And I have about, 167 first cousins spread out over 2 different cities. And, it was really... It certainly wasn't, the richness was in the fun and the love and the family and the size and the chaos of it, and that's kind of what I remember. But there's a tremendous spirit of oneness in that, and of assisting each other and of help. And, there's things that you do for family and community and friends that I just grew up knowing this is part of what makes life rich, and this is what you do. You invest and you give back, and being able to give back is a blessing and a privilege that you get so much more from than the person receiving. And so when I went into my own adulthood and into the corporate side and started having success, it was always a part of what else can I do to help give back, and how can I help connect and share this community with, the business community, the corporate community, so that, we can help broaden the family, right? And that same sense of helping each other can continue.
Absolutely. So you did your graduate work here at Marquette. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us a little bit about how your time being connected to Marquette as a student really helped shape your sense of our mission, right? And in your life, excellence, faith, leadership, service. How did that shape your career and the choices that you made and where you went?
I will say that having done Marquette as a grad student is slightly different than an undergrad, right? Like, no naked beer slides for me, right? Or any of the other crazy stories that I'm sure absolutely never happened here. But it was different for me, but certainly that same aspect of, the 4 pillars was still present. And one of the things that I think it did for me is it was, and at that point, I went through the executive program, so I had 10 years in my career already. But it was a formal point of reflection for me, right? Understanding those 4 pillars, and being able to reflect on my life. And I don't think, I studied business and wound up going into hospitality. And I think it was a great career for me, and really value the experience. But I don't necessarily think that hospitality is very service-oriented. And one of the things that I think that being in the hospitality industry really teaches you is, who's doing the work, right? It is really about care of that team who always has the front line care of the guest, right, which is your livelihood. And so that was very, very important for me, but it wasn't really until I did grad school here at Marquette that I was able to formalize that more and understand, well, how does that really what does that mean for me as a leader and how I want to lead, and what does that mean for me in terms of how I view my base of work and who I am. And so I'm very grateful for that opportunity to reflect on a way, in a more formal way, to understand who I was as a leader.
I think that's such an important reminder for all of us who work here. I have spent my career working with undergraduate students, but for each of us in our own work and our own lives, we encounter students at different points in their life journey, but each of us too, right, comes to Marquette and encounters our own life story vis-a-vis our mission. And I think what a great reminder that it's not just for our undergraduate students, and that our mission serves as that deep point of reflection for all people who encounter our campus, and what a gift that can be. You have talked in several different places, Nancy, about the optimism that you have for the work that you're doing with the Hispanic Collaborative. And as you alluded to, there are also some systemic challenges, right, in the disparities that are facing the Hispanic community. Where does your optimism come from, and how do you continue to push forward in the face of some big challenges that face the broader Milwaukee community and subpopulations as part of it?
Yeah, so, those of you who know me, I wouldn't say, you will say I'm an optimist, but you're not going to say I'm like the little ray of sunshine that's always smiling and things at you. But there is a sense of optimism to me that, I think any challenge can be overcome, right? It takes work, it takes smarts, it takes resources, it takes people, it takes collaboration, but it can be done if the desire is there to do it. And that's something that I try to instill in staff and folks that I have the pleasure of working with, right? That you absolutely can do anything, but it's going to take hard work. And I think when we look at some of the big systemic issues that Milwaukee faces, it's not something that we're going to tackle in 5 years or a year. And I refuse to go longer than 10 years, right? 10 years is my horizon that says, we may need to do another one on the end of that one, but what can we accomplish within 10 years? And I think it's a lot if we have the willingness to do that. And so where does my optimism come from? From people telling me that I can't do things and proving them wrong, I guess.
I love that. So you have many demands on your time and the very important role of mom as well, in addition to your career. How do you stay grounded in the midst of all of the things that pull you in so many different directions?
So, for me, it's a little bit of knowing myself and when do I need to energize and how do I get that energy. I was just telling Amy, I'm kind of an introvert, right? And so sometimes just cocooning back in and having a little private time helps me stay energized and taking the time when you need it. But really, it's as much as my 14-year-old challenges me, that can also be energizing in some way, shape, or form, so.
We were talking about the eye rolls of teens and preteens before we began here, So I'm scanning the room to see if we have any students, and maybe we have some joining us, but many of us work with students. What advice do you have for people early in their lives, early in their careers, as they're in the process of discerning who they are and their call, embracing the gifts that they have, and finding out the needs in the world that they feel called to serve? What advice do you have for young people, but maybe all of us, because at different points we're called in different ways?
So, I love this open to possibilities, right? I love that statement for a couple different things. But I will say that being open to possibilities isn't just a random state of mind, right? It takes work to do that. And so that means that if you're actually open to possibilities, then go places and do things that are going to make you a little uncomfortable because they're not normal or usual. And even if it's a little scary, or if it is uncomfortable and that's not something that you like to do, to truly be open to those possibilities, you have to be present and you have to be there. And you have to hear with everything. And so it's intentional and it's actionable. It's not just a state of mind. And if you can embrace that, I think that will serve you to help listen to where things are calling you and what you want to do, and really understand what might be out there for you.
So before we turn it over to the audience for questions, I have one last question. And in that spirit of being open to possibility, are there things that you are open to possibility with right now? What are you remaining open to right now in your own life?
Yeah, so, I'd say the biggest one for me right now is that in this work of, calling for the Hispanic Collaborative that I want to do, I think one of the things that's tugging at me right now is going back to, this very complex systemic issue that we deal with. This realization, Latino community isn't solely in this alone, nor can we expect the solution to only be built on what the Latino community can do. And so, one of the things that I am actively doing right now is understanding, well, what is the juncture of solutions look like if we start looking at the African American issues in our community, and what does that mean for those broader civic organizations in our community, and how can we begin to tie these pieces together? Because the size of the problem requires this big-sized solution that can address that. And so it was something that I didn't think not that I wouldn't be open to it, but it wasn't part of my thought 2 years ago, even with starting the Hispanic Collaborative, and now one that I see more and more every day that we might need to roll up our sleeves and dig in.
Great, thank you. I asked a lot of questions, but maybe you have some, and this is an opportunity for us to really hear from Nancy and her deep wisdom that she shares. So any questions that we have from our audience here for Nancy? Put you all on the spot. Not just the spotlight on us up here. I teach undergrads. I'm okay with silence. Right here.
I don't know if we're standing up, or what are we doing?
Sure, that'll work well.
I'm Lauren Matthew. I'm the Latinx Studies and Latin American Studies Director, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit about where you see Marquette's role in this broader, citywide, collaborative view of hopefully serving not just the Hispanic community, but the entire city. Where do you see us fitting into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I will share, and if the statistics are out there, if you want to see kind of the whole, what does the region produce in terms of college-educated individuals, 2-year and 4-year degrees, by race, by ethnicity, by area of study. HERA puts that out there, Higher Education Regional Alliance. So you can go look at it. And it's one thing that I look at pretty closely. And if you kind of look under the hood in there, and certainly one thing that I know that everybody knows here is if you think about who's going to higher ed these days, that student is changing, right? That client and that customer is changing. They are much more first generation. They are much more diverse than before, and it's no longer, it's probably not possible to work your own way through college without coming through debt. And so there's some key elements to that client that have changed that I think higher ed, and certainly Marquette, is paying attention to and responding to, right? But I think if we think about broader Milwaukee community or the region really, and what are some of our key issues here, you know, Milwaukee itself, I mean, this isn't about Milwaukee versus Waukesha or Madison or Chicago. This is really about the region, and there are other regions all around the world that we continue to compete with for businesses and overall economic prosperity and things that affect all of our lives here. And I think if we look at our workforce and the makeup of our workforce and what some of our key issues here is our levels of education and our pervasive segregation still continue to affect outcomes for our general community that really hold all of us back here in the region. We're as good as our workforce can take us, and our workforce is growing. And so the role that Marquette as a higher ed institution plays is very, very important. If you look at Latino and African American communities, there's a 20 percentage point difference between the percentage of adults that hold a college degree there. Well, what does that mean for them? And the work that Marquette is doing on access and support on both sides is necessary, right? And I look at this as a trustee or as a member of the community that cares and say, how can I help with that? How can we increase the pace of it and increase the impact? Because it's wonderful that we can help 10 more students today, 25 more students today, but we live in a community that requires us to help 250 more today and 2,500 more tomorrow. And that's the reality of it. And I think some of the innovation and the thought and collaboration that can happen with higher ed can help us get there. If I had the solution right now, I would be implementing that solution.
Yeah, you wouldn't be sitting here.
But I think that, and I don't think any communities yet have those real solutions, right, of how to upskill and reskill people and how to really kind of close those gaps on the number, those numbers that I just talked about college education. And that's really how we begin to transform our community and affect the lives of everyone and help ourselves in that same process, because you're increasing the amount of disposable income that people have and an overall quality of life. And so it's very, very much a part of it. I'm exceptionally appreciative of all of the regional institutions that are really trying to find tangible solutions, right, to affect how many people are getting through higher ed. We still have to work on the pipeline issue, and then we have to work on the scale issue. And that's something I think that Marquette reaches out to community a lot and is looking for some of those collaborative solutions together.
It's a great question, Laura. Thank you. And Nancy, thanks for your response. Other questions? Quiet bunch today. It's that afternoon time. We all need a piece of chocolate. There's cookies at your table.
Starbucks.
Infusion of sugar for the afternoon. You know, I asked earlier, Nancy, about advice for students and all of us, but are there other pieces of advice that you have for working professionals here at Marquette in the Milwaukee region, women of faith that you'd like to share with us?
You know, I think the only thing I'd like to share, I think, is something that I end up telling my daughter a lot, and she's 14, so I think her reaction is a little different than everyone else's. You know, but one of the things that I say is be who you are and understand that you're not alone in this, right? And so if she is somebody who is of Catholic faith, and that's important to her, and how she leads her life, and I share with her. I mean, there are board meetings, right? That we start with a prayer, and Marquette isn't my only one, and there are different elements to that. And I would say embrace who you are because you understand that you're not alone, and that will help serve you in where you want to go in your career. So don't be afraid of that. Who you are is wonderful, and embrace that.
What a beautiful invitation for each of us. Nancy, it has just been such a pleasure getting to know you a little bit and hearing from you today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience and your openness to the new possibilities that lie ahead for you and for all of us today. So please join me in thanking Nancy. It's my pleasure now to bring Karen Ortiz up to lead us in an examen. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. And my name is Karen Ortiz. I'm part of the University Advancement Team. I'm also a student, and I'm the Vice President of Alpha Sigma Nu.